Carlyle handed me the phone and I tried to block out how worried his thoughts had become. He was my pillar of strength in all this. If he lost faith, I'd probably lose my mind. Edward, Esme answered almost instantly. Her voice sounded as worried as Carlyle's mind, and I wondered if somehow she sensed his distress. We're fine. For now. We just passed Vancouver about 20 minutes ago and we're still driving, but I can't hear the tracker anymore. I'm worried he's figured something out. How are things going with you or Rose? Did Victoria follow you, for a while? It didn't take her long to give up chasing us, though. I knew switching clothes would only get us so far, but at least it gave Alice and Jasper a chance to get Bella out of town. Victoria headed back to Forks after about 20 miles. She's been all over the place, the school, the airport. She's trying to figure out which way they went, but she eventually ended up back at Bella's house, so I'm sure she's as confused as we intended her to be, and Charlie's safe. I added, knowing that the next phone call I would make would be to Bella and I'd need to reassure her that he was fine. Yes, he's been at the station. I've been keeping an eye on him there while Rose makes runs between our house and Charlie's. Don't worry about him. I don't think Victoria has any reason to attack, and if she does we'll stop her. Thanks, I sighed, relieved. Then I started thinking about something she'd said. Airport, I asked, my mind racing as I considered a terrible possibility. Edward, what's wrong? Carlyle asked, no longer trying to hide the panic he was feeling. I'm an idiot. I growled, throwing my head back against the seat. I lost his voice somewhere around Vancouver. I knew I heard him laugh. Vancouver. Laugh. What are you talking about? We're coming home. I said to Esme as I hung up. I looked over at Carlyle's expression and continued with a deep sigh. He knows Bella's not with us and he knew we were far enough away that I wouldn't figure it out until he was already heading back. I'm confused. Carlyle said. Yeah. Edward, Emmett chimed in from the back. We don't really have time for the cryptic. Where is James? I really hope I'm wrong, but I believe if we go to the Vancouver airport, we'll find his scent. He's flying back to Forks, Carlyle asked, shocked. Well, I can't be sure of where he's heading, but it's really the only thing that makes sense. He must have known I could hear him, and he let us think he was following us, but really he was leading the chase. He really does know what he's doing. Emmett mumbled, sounding almost as frustrated as I felt. 140, doesn't matter. I said firmly. If he really is heading back to Forks, it won't take us long to find him. And when we do, he's going to have to deal with all 5 of us. Oh, please. Emmett scoffed. You know Rose isn't gonna get her hands dirty. If you fight, she fights. I said, remembering how she had reacted back at the house, though of course only I had heard it. She may be self-centered and the only one of us whose heart didn't just stop beating, it actually disappeared. But she loves you. She won't just stand by and watch you fight. She'll be at your side. A smile pulled at the corner of Emmett's mouth and his mind launched into a series of thoughts regarding himself and Rosalie that I really wasn't interested in hearing. Carlyle, I said loudly. Trying to drown Emmett out. I want to check the airport. Just to make sure my hunch is right. He knows getting on a plane would be a sure way for us to lose his trail. Assuming he's on a plane right now. I think it's best we head back to Forks, Carlyle nodded as he turned the car around. Fueled by anxiety and concern, and thanks to my built-in radar detector, it didn't take us long to get back into the city. Carlyle circled around the airport once looking for anything indicating James had been there while I hurried inside. Sure enough, his scent was everywhere. He'd run around to every terminal. No doubt trying to confuse us, and unfortunately, his trick had worked. There was no way of knowing which plane he'd left on or where he was heading. Carlyle read the expression on my face as I jumped inside the car again. Do you want to call or should I? He asked solemnly. Go ahead. I muttered, lost in thought. Fill Alice in, see if she has seen anything that would help us figure out what he's up to, and then I want to talk to Bella. I need to hear her voice. No, she's still okay, I understand. But please. Try not to alarm her, he thought, dialing Alice's number. She answered after only one ring, though I was actually surprised it took her that long. Usually when one of us tried to call her, she'd end up calling us first while we were still in the process of dialing. Alice, things have gotten somewhat more complicated, he said, trying to remain calm. Carlyle, I heard her answer simply. I knew that tone. It was the tone she took when someone told her something she'd already seen. I wasn't sure whether I felt comforted by the fact that she'd already had a vision, or more nervous. What if she told me something I wasn't ready to hear? Bella is there with you right now, correct? Yes, she said, and I was instantly filled with relief. I was also grateful for the serenity of Alice's voice. I wasn't sure what she had seen or how much of her vision she would have told Bella, but I hoped that as far as Bella knew, things were still under control. Of course she needed to know the reality of the situation, but if possible, I wanted to be the one to tell her. We lost James somewhere between the border and just past Vancouver, Carlisle continued. We caught his scent at the airport, but we don't know where he went from there. It makes sense that he would go back to Forks. With no trail to follow, where else would he go? Still, we were hoping you'd seen something that could give us some insight. I just saw him, she said, voice still steady as she described a vision of James in a room full of mirrors with wooden floors and a gold stripe around it. She said his plans weren't clear to her, but she knew he'd be in that room and would be waiting for something. Whatever made him get on that plane. It was leading him to those rooms. 141. Is Bella beside you right now? Carlisle asked, glancing at me. I held my breath, waiting for her response. How much did Bella already know? Yes, she said, and I tried to force myself not to be upset. It made sense she would have told Bella something had gone wrong. I only hoped it hadn't frightened her too greatly. Carlisle handed me the phone just in time for me to hear her nervous hello, Bella, I breathed, amazed by how much better I felt simply by hearing her voice. For once brief moment it felt like nothing could touch us. Oh, Edward. I was so worried. She cried, and I had to smile. She was human and fragile and being hunted by a monster, yet she was worried about me. Bella, I told you not to worry about anything but yourself. Where are you? She asked, which forced me to think of the miles that were still between us. I would have given anything to be by her side, and I cursed myself for ever having let my family talk me into separating from her. We're outside of Vancouver. Bella, I'm sorry we lost him. I said the words even though she already knew, still somehow feeling the need to apologize to her. He seems suspicious of us. He's careful to stay just far enough away that I can't hear what he's thinking. But he's gone now. It looks like he got on a plane. We think he's heading back to Forks to start over, at least that's what we'd been assuming so far. Now, given Alice's vision, I didn't feel as confident. What she'd described didn't sound like anything I'd ever seen in Forks. I could only hope something had led James down a wrong path, and if we couldn't find him quickly, that his futile waiting would buy Bella and by the time we'd need to disappear. I know. Alice saw that he got away. You don't have to worry, though. He won't find anything to lead him to you. You just have to stay there and wait till we find him again. Or until I can't take it anymore and I come to find you. I added, though I kept that carefully to myself. I'll be fine, she said bravely, and I felt a surge of pride. She truly was the most amazing creature I'd ever known. Is Esme with Charlie? Yes, the female has been in town. She went to the house, but while Charlie was at work. She hasn't gone near him, so don't be afraid. He's safe with Esme and Rosalie watching. What is she doing? She asked, just a hint of nervousness creeping into her voice. Probably trying to pick up the trail. She's been all through the town during the night. Rosalie traced her through the airport, all the roads around town, the school. She's digging. Bella, but there's nothing to find. We'd been very careful to mask Bella's scent before she left town. She was riding in a car she'd never been in, wearing clothes that were not her own. Everything that smelled like Bella had been leading in the opposite direction Alice had driven. There was nothing that would lead Victoria, or James if was in fact flying back to Forks to pick up her scent again, anywhere near Phoenix. And you're sure Charlie's safe? She asked again, and I could almost feel the tears that were filling her eyes. Yes. Esme won't let him out of her sight. And we'll be there soon. If the tracker gets anywhere near Forks, we'll have him. 142. I miss you, she said softly, once again making everything else disappear. I listened closely until I could hear her heartbeat. Although it was muffled and distorted through the cell phone, I was comforted by it nonetheless. I know, Bella. Believe me, I know. It's like you've taken half myself away with you. Come and get it then. She said, her voice suddenly teasing. though there was a fierceness that colored her words and reminded me how much I wanted to do exactly that. Soon, I promised. As soon as I possibly can. I will make you safe first. I added, more of a reminder to myself than to Bella. I was fighting everything inside of me not to drop Carlisle and Emmett back in Forks and rush to be with her. Of course I couldn't do that to my family, and it wasn't at all logical, but as I'd learned during my time with Bella, love seldom is. I love you, she said sweetly, and I could feel my time listening to the purity of her voice coming to an end. I took a moment to memorize the sound as she spoke the 3 words that would get me through the rest of this ordeal. Could you believe that, despite everything I've put you through, I love you, too? I asked desperately. Yes. I can, actually. I'll come for you soon, I'll be waiting. With that I hung up the phone and allowed myself one moment of peace, basking in the glow of her love for me and the knowledge that she was waiting for my return. As if soaking in and feeding off of the desperate longing I felt to be with Bella. Emmett and Carlisle's thoughts simultaneously drifted to Rosalie and Esme. We all quietly daydreamed of being back in the arms of the women we loved while Carlisle unconsciously pushed the pedal to the floor. Once again outside the crowded streets of the busy city, he was driving at maximum speed toward home. It didn't take as long to get back to Forks as it had to get to Vancouver, partly because we were no longer trying to keep James within mind-reading distance, and partly because there was a new wave of urgency creeping through all of us. Everything had changed now that we weren't sure where James was. We pulled up to the house and raced up the stairs. "Rose, baby," Emmett called as he charged through our front door. Carlisle and I were right behind him and saw her casually saunter down the stairs. Being the only one personally unaffected if something were to happen to Bella, she seemed completely relaxed. "I'm here," she said calmly. "Although I'm not sure why you are. Aren't you all supposed to be out dismembering and burning up a vampire?" Her slight smirk infuriated me, but it wasn't the time to let my emotions get out of control. Obviously Esme hadn't told her what was happening, which made me feel somewhat concerned. Was Charlie in trouble after all? But the most important thing was to get her up to speed and figure out what to do next. We lost James somewhere near Vancouver. He's on a plane, but we don't know where he's going. I'd appreciate it if you could run over to the airport and try to catch his scent. If he is here, there will be no more leading him around. It's time for us to end this. Now, yeah, Emmett chimed in. Oh, for the love of. Does he really have to be so excited about it? 143. Rosalie's and Carlisle's mutual disgust over Emmett's enthusiasm actually made me smile for the first time since hearing Bella's voice. "Rose," I said, trying to keep the momentary smile on my face. "Airport, fine, just add it to the list," she thought, rolling her eyes. I cocked my head and looked at her questioningly. "Oh, that's right. I'm keeping a list of all the things you owe me for when this mess is over." I snarled loudly at her and the perfectly innocent smile that was painted across her face. "Edward, focus. Please." Carlisle thought disapprovingly. "Let it go, man. Whatever it is, just let it go," Emmett added, looking back and forth between the two of us. Without another word, Rosalie was out the door. I turned to Emmett and Carlisle and tried to think of what we should do considering we really had no idea where James was. "Victoria is nearby, so I'd really rather not leave the house empty," I said. "Besides, there's not much we can do until we have a better idea whether or not he's even here, Edward. I know you don't want to think about this, but what if Rosalie finds that he didn't return to Forks?" Carlisle asked. "I honestly have no idea," I said quietly. "Edward." I looked into his eyes and felt the reality of he'd already anticipated wash over me. "I guess in that case I would go to Bella. If we don't know where James is, I am not going to risk leaving her alone. She's not alone." He reminded me. "You know what I mean." "Yes. I do. And I understand. We would stay here, and you and Bella would run." It wasn't really a question, but I nodded infinitesimally. "Come on guys, you know I hate when you do that." Emmett complained. "I apologize," Carlisle said. Turning to him, "Edward and I were just thinking about all the various possibilities. I trust you would continue to hunt James if your brother were to go to return to Bella." Emmett turned to me, incredulous for a moment before his expression softened. "Yeah, I would," he finally said, never taking his eyes from mine. "Do what you need to do. Jasper and I can handle James, thank you," I said softly. Again seeing both brotherly love for myself and sisterly love for Bella emanating from him. The three of us stood in silence for an endless span of time until Esme called to tell us that Charlie was home and it appeared Victoria hadn't followed him. Still, she thought it best to stay near the house since it seemed like the most likely place for either Victoria or James to go if they were trying to pick up Bella's scent again. Eventually Rosalie came home, still looking like she was in no particular hurry. "Did I miss anything exciting?" she asked, and the three of us let out a collective sigh. "Fine," she said indignantly, looking everywhere but at me. "Oh, great. I thought she was just being her usual 144, obnoxious self, but it turns out she was stalling." I already knew what she was going to say before she said it. "He's not here," she finally admitted, staring at the floor as her expression transformed into something I'd never seen from her before. "I'm really sorry, Edward. I know how hard this must be for you." I was so taken aback by her sudden compassion, it took a moment for the fear to fully consume me. However, when Carlyle spoke, the force of what she was saying came crashing down on me. "I'll call Alice and tell her you're on your way." No sooner had he reached for the phone than it began ringing. Now there was the Alice I knew and loved. "Alice," he began, but she instantly cut him off. Feeling my chest tighten, I took a step toward the phone and listened to her frantic words. "He's here, or at least he will be soon." Carlyle's eyes widened and he handed the phone to me without a word. "Alice, what did you see?" "I saw him in Bella's mother's house. He'll be there very soon. I don't know how he found her." "Edward. I'm so sorry." "No," I said, shaking my head in frustration and confusion. "No, don't be sorry. I'm glad you saw where he was, it means we know where to go. Just keep Bella safe until I can get there. Keep watching, make sure he's staying there waiting for her. We'll get Bella somewhere safe, then we'll surround the house. Even if Esme and Rosalie stay here protecting Charlie from Victoria, he'll be outnumbered 5-1, 4-1. She said firmly. "What, even if we know exactly where he is and we're sure to win the fight, you don't think for one second that any of us are willing to leave Bella alone, do you?" I thought about what she was saying and realized that once again Alice was one step ahead. "Thank you, Alice, of course. Besides, Bella is a nervous wreck. And she's not even worried about herself. She's worried about you." She sighed. I could tell she was rolling her eyes. Even Jasper is having difficulty calming her down. "Honestly, I love her, you know I do, but I don't think I can take much more." Her voice had turned sarcastic and I gladly took the moment of reprieve from all of the fears and uncertainty. "Edward, you two need to be together now," she continued kindly. "Don't worry about James, we can handle it. Now if everyone hurries, you can catch the next flight out from Seattle. Remember, Port Angeles doesn't fly directly to Phoenix. We'll meet you there soon, thank you." I said again, and listened as the phone went dead. The entire conversation had lasted less than a minute, and I was sure if Bella had been listening she wouldn't have understood a word of it. All she needed to know was that I was on my way, and soon I'd have her safely wrapped up in my arms where she belonged. "Let's go," I said firmly, and within seconds we were flying out the door and toward Seattle. We raced down the highway and, as Alice had promised, arrived just in time to catch the flight. I tried to force myself to calm down as the plane took off. At least for the moment. There was nothing 145 more that I could do. Alice, Jasper, and Bella would be waiting at the airport for us. Alice would be able to ensure James was nowhere nearby, so Bella and I would be safe to run as far away from Phoenix as we could get. I trusted the rest of my family to take care of James and they'd contact us when it was safe to come home. With a great stretch of the imagination I could pretend that Bella and I were just taking a vacation together, and when we returned everything would be normal again. Or at least as normal as things ever were for us. "Edward, can you hear anything yet? Is there any sign of him?" Carlyle asked, and it was only then that I realized the plane was landing. Amazingly enough, I'd blocked out every voice and every thought of the people surrounding me for the entire duration of the flight. I listened, though of course I knew it was in vain. Alice's vision was clear. He'd already be in place by now, waiting for Bella. No, nothing. But it doesn't matter. Bella's here and I'm going to get her somewhere safe. I closed my eyes and focused in on Alice's thoughts. I was so in tune with her it only took a moment, and the second I found her I gasped. What is it? Carlyle asked quietly, though the panic was clear in his eyes. They lost Bella, I said frantically as a few heads turned in our direction. Quietly. Edward. We can't make a scene. Now what do you mean, they lost her? They're searching for her, all over the airport. They're both confused, they don't understand how or why she ran away from them, but Alice is crazy with worry. She knows we've landed and she's coming to meet us while Jasper keeps looking. And there's something else. Something she's blocking from me. I whispered, a new wave of fear welling up inside me. What was Alice hiding? And why would Bella run away from the only people who could really protect her? It felt like it took forever to disembark the plane. Couldn't the humans move any faster? When my eyes locked with Alice's, I saw it as much as I had felt it, that something she didn't want to tell me. Alice, I yelled, running toward her at much too fast a pace. Carlyle and Emmett followed behind me, purposefully walking slowly as if their lagging behind would make up for the fact that I'd turned into a blurry streak across the terminal. Edward. I don't understand. Jasper was taking her to get something to eat, she was with him 1 second, then she ducked into a bathroom and he lost her. We've been looking all over for her but there's no trace. I'm so sorry. I don't know what else to do, what did you see? I demanded, and her expression told me she knew exactly what I was asking. She looked at the ground, a mixture of shame and terror on her face. The first time I saw him in the room full of mirrors, he was alone. Then when I saw him at her mother's house, he was still alone. I don't know what changed, but the next thing I saw he was back in the mirror room and… She stopped as if unable to finish the sentence. I knew what she was going to say, and although I didn't want to hear it, couldn't make myself believe it. I needed her to say the words aloud. Alice, I screamed. Bella was there with him. She whispered, her eyes finally meeting mine. She was alive, but she was terrified. And he was looking at her with the sickest look of pleasure I'd ever seen. Her blood is taunting him, and it can only keep him playing his game for so long. 146. I clenched my fists and a snarl ripped through me. Carlyle and Emmett were immediately at my side, hands on my shoulders and silently willing me to remain calm. We needed to leave the airport without attracting any attention. Then when we were outside we could formulate a plan without fear of anyone overhearing us. All of us lost in our own devastating thoughts, we hurried to a deserted area of one of the parking lots. All right, none of the humans can hear us. I snapped angrily. Now what do you intend to do to get Bella back? I was yelling at them and I felt terrible for taking out my anger and terror on my family when all they'd done was help and put themselves at risk for Bella and I, but my mind had lost all touch with reason the second Alice had let her guard down and a picture of Bella's horror-struck face flashed through her mind. It was one thing to hear Alice tell me what she'd seen and another to have to witness it myself. I'd never hated anyone as much as I hated James in that moment. Except perhaps myself for having allowed all of this to happen. Well, Bella seemed to think the room I saw was a ballet studio here in Phoenix, Alice said, her eyes closing as if she were trying to get another view of it. She told us it was very near her mother's house, and I'm sure James is in one of those two places. We'll run together then, Jasper. Emmett and I will go to the house. You and Carlyle try to find the studio, and if James isn't at the house we'll meet you there as soon as we can. This will work. Edward. I promise you she's still alive, and we'll be there shortly. It will all be over soon. I tried to take comfort in her assurance, and I trusted that she'd told me everything she had seen. As of now, Bella was alive, and I promised myself I would keep repeating that thought until the moment I could end the miserable creature who was threatening her. It worked for about a mile. Then without my consent, images of Bella lying helpless and bleeding flooded my mind. I stared wide-eyed at Alice, worried for a moment I was seeing another one of her visions, but her mind was focused on finding the house. With a sigh of relief, I realized it was only my own imagination tormenting me. As we ran, the first started to think of every terrible and unacceptable reality that might be waiting when we found her. If we were too late, if my love, my reason for everything was taken from me, I felt the certain what Carlyle had known all along was the bitter truth. I wouldn't survive it if I lost her. The five of us had been running at equal speed, but that sudden realization made me move faster than I ever had before. My mind was racing as fast as my body. sifting through possibility after possibility of what end I would meet if Bella were gone. The easiest way would be to surrender to James, let him finish what he'd started. That as if he could be bothered. Bella, protected by her own army of vampires as he had put it, had been the real challenge. What fun would it be for him to kill a vampire who didn't put up any resistance, who'd already given up trying to survive? Besides, my family was with me and I knew they'd never let any harm come to me, even if it were what I wanted. I decided it would have to be calculated, planned and executed far away from them. I knew all the ways Carlyle had tried to kill himself in the beginning and thereby knew how effective they were. There was really only one way I could think of to ensure I would not have to go on without my Bella Volterra. I know what you're thinking. Carlyle interrupted my silent musings. I glanced over my shoulder to see him struggling to keep up with me. With a low growl I slowed my pace slightly. I'm not a mind reader, but I know you. And I know what you're thinking about right now. Leave it alone. Carlyle, I mumbled, though the guilt was already starting to settle in. 147. I know you love her, but please try to remember that the rest of us love you, too. I don't want to lose you, son. She's everything. Carlyle, I whispered, hoping the others were far enough behind and too lost in their own thoughts to overhear. Would you want to go on if you lost Esme? Would there be any point to this miserable life without her? There was utter silence for a moment until Carlyle, learned as he was at blocking me from things he didn't want me to hear, started reciting countries and their capitals. Irritated, but quite certain I'd made my point. I charged on ahead. Of course I didn't want to put my family through that, least of all Carlyle who had truly been a father figure to me all these decades, so I channeled all my energy into making the continuing of that conversation unnecessary. We would reach Bella in time and she'd be safe with me again. The others would destroy James and Bella and I could go back to being two idiots in love. Bella will be safe. We'll be together again. It became my mantra as we ran until finally we reached our destination. With a quick nod, Alice, Jasper, and Emmett headed towards the house and Carlyle and I circled the block. With a stab of fear. I heard James's mind and I knew we were close. Like so many times before I wished I could hear Bella as well, though of course the need had never been so great. As if granting me some kind of masochistic answer to my desire. I could suddenly hear her. I heard her scream and cry my name. Leaving Carlyle behind and having absolutely no regard for the fact that I was about to hurl myself at James single-handedly. I flew toward the door of the studio. Go get the others. I screamed as I kicked the door entirely off its hinges. I didn't stop to see whether he was still behind me or had turned around to do as I'd asked. It didn't matter. Bella needed me and I was certain the rage I felt at her anguished cry would be sufficient to take on a whole coven of vampires. The moment I entered the room, the smell of Bella's blood assaulted me. It was potent and fresh, yet I could feel no bloodlust. My jaw tightened and the venom pooled, but my only desire was to rip James apart, make him suffer the way he'd made her suffer. My eyes scanned the darkness until I found a shape huddled in the farthest corner. Misshapen and mangled. Bella was no longer crying out. If it weren't for the faint beating of her heart I might have feared I was too late. James was crouched over her holding something that appeared to be a video camera. His breathing was ragged as he desperately sought what he craved. His thirst was overtaking him to the point that he didn't hear me enter the room. A smile pulled my lips back over my teeth as I contemplated the fact that he wouldn't even hear my approach. I crouched, readying myself for the attack, then flashed toward him like a bolt of lightning. Being careful to launch him in the opposite direction from where Bella was lying. I hit him with the full force of my fury. A snarl ripped from his throat as he crashed into a wall of mirrors. The camera in his hand flying across the room. He was stunned but only for a moment as he threw himself at me, teeth bared and hatred in his eyes. We held each other at arm's length, both of us pushing the other away with the fullness of our strength. I knew you'd come for her, he thought, instantly confirming what I'd already figured out. He knew I could read his mind. It was what had made the execution of his plan possible. He'd used my own powers against me. Granted. I didn't think you'd make it here quite so quickly. Don't you know the chase is half the fun? 148. His voice, full of ire, reignited my rage. I pushed him back with crushing force, smashing another row of mirrors behind him.